Ladies and gentlemen, we can maybe start the session. Good afternoon again. I'm very pleased to introduce the session on socioeconomic benefits of renewable energy deployment in the GCC. So we're moving from energy access to sort of different world. I thought that it would be nice to conclude, since we're in this region, and because of some of the analysis that we have been carrying out in IRENA on the potential socioeconomic benefits of renewable energy for the region, we thought that it would be a very nice way of ending the day and gather some of the experience that our distinguished panel will share with us. A lot is going on in the GCC, and we're really happy to have this panel. We will, as the other sessions, we will start with a presentation. Ms. Rula Majdalani from the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia has kindly agreed to do the overall GCC presentation. Rula is Director of ESQA Sustainable Development and Productivity Division. And this is a division that basically promotes among ESQA countries sustainability of natural resources with a special focus on water, energy, and green production. She holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning, and she has several publications in green economy and integrated management of water resources, housing development, and sustainable cities. If I can ask you to please give your presentation now. Thank you.
مساء الخير جميعاً. Good afternoon. My presentation will, okay, it's better this way. So in my presentation, I will address the drivers for why do we need renewable energy in GCC countries, starting with the issue of energy security, climate change, integrated water resource management, and of course, zooming in on the issue of jobs, as it was mentioned, as a main, as a core issue within the socioeconomic field, and then the role of renewable energy in improving the overall management of the energy sector. So in a region where that is rich in fossil fuel, in oil and gas, we ask, of course, why do we need renewable energy? And the answer, I'm not going to dwell a lot on that, but it's a region that the consumption of or demand for energy is increasing in the power sector and in all energy sector, which means there is very little left for export, and domestic consumption with a little and reduced export is leaving also less resources to invest in socioeconomic development. The next issue is, sorry. Okay, the climate change issue is missed here, but I wanted to highlight that, of course, the climate change or CO2 emission is a sensitive issue for GCC countries. Those who are familiar with the debate on the climate change will know that. But again, it's maybe the CO2 emission of GCC compared to the world is not that big, but it's increasing, and this is one opportunity with renewable energy to reduce CO2 emissions. Natural resources, of course, water is a main driver for using energy. This is a region that has water scarcity, and a lot of the energy is produced for desalination. We know that GCC countries have absolute water live below the absolute poverty line in terms of water scarcity, And water extraction is as a percentage of freshwater withdrawal as a percentage of renewable resources is very high, and therefore we need energy for extraction of water resources. That's we covered the climate change mitigation. Sorry about the mix of the slides. Desalination is a main driver. There will always be a demand for desalination. If we look from 2000 to 2008, we have had an increase of 154% increase in desalination, and CO2 emission. If we think of using renewable energy in this sector, there is a lot that can be saved, up to 640,000 tons of CO2 emitted per day can be saved with renewable energy. Now, the issue of socio-economic, the demographic and socio-economic drivers. This is a region that is that has been experiencing high population growth, a high urbanization rate, and a large share of its population are among the young people. And we know that with urbanization, with high population growth and high standards of living, there is the demand for water and energy will continue increasing no matter what. So there is a point where it's inelastic, demand for water and energy. So here we're talking about a relatively young population that has a higher rate of unemployment compared to even in terms and at the world compared with world level, it's quite high. Among 40%, the participation of young people in the economic sector do not exceed 40%. And compared to the Arab region, where it is 30%, and globally it's high, but not as much as in GCC countries. So we have here a situation where there is a need for jobs, but jobs that are offered are maybe in the private sector and are not that attractive. We have a labor force that is not that equipped for a modern economy, and therefore we look at renewable energy probably as a game changer in this process, and based on a number of studies that have shown that renewable energy creates a number of jobs. Now, I'm going to skip these 3 slides, but just to say that renewable energy is not new for the Gulf region. Although presently it's less than 0.2% of the power capacity. However, the targets are to reach some 20%, and therefore there is investment, there is potential for renewable energy. But the question is, where are the jobs? As we've heard earlier this morning, we've had a number disaggregating what do we mean by renewable energy jobs. Now, the direct jobs, if we look at them, these are the traditional jobs from design, manufacturing, installation, operation and maintenance, etc. But there is a whole range of indirect jobs in terms of research, in terms of finance, in terms of policy analysis, in terms of SME development, small and medium enterprise, that needs still to be captured and better understood to address, to really say here are the frontiers or the opportunities for renewable energy. The study, IRENA study, I think has provided really very interesting work in terms of the estimates, and I'm really happy to hear. I heard some questioning of what is this number about. I think that we really, maybe IRENA has produced interesting information in that sense. 5.7 million jobs have been produced between 2009 and 2012, with some interesting trends to observe, for example, China, EU, Brazil, etc. But we need to ask to qualify these jobs, particularly when we speak for the Arab region. Now, if we take that jobs are, it's a function of these are the sectors we are investing in, the targeted investment in renewable energy, and therefore we assume that a one standard fits it all in terms of job creation. I think it's we really need to be more to use qualifiers for that end. And in that sense, I think we need to ask a number of questions. Like, for example, are these, when we say renewable energy investment, are they the manufactured capacity produced locally or imported? Are they, what is the profile of the labor force? What is the productivity of the labor force? Are the GCC nationals, the young people, interested in these type of jobs? Or will they end up having labor migration, importing labor to do these jobs? What is the scale of production that we are talking about? And the fast pace of technological development is also a factor that should be brought in when we look at jobs created in GCC countries. I think the more interesting aspect of renewable energy that I see in it potential for change is its impact, in the direct and indirect impact on the management of the overall energy sector. The fact that it introduces decentralization, the fact that it introduces public-private partnership, the fact that it introduces the smart grid process are factors that brings a qualitative improvement to the management of the energy sector in the direction of building, of institution building and capacity building, not at the individual level only, but also capacity building at an institutional level, which should not be underestimated. I would like to conclude with a number of questions. I know that this meeting, that this conference is on renewable energy, but I don't think we should look at renewable energy without really looking at the interface between renewable energy and energy efficiency, because we can't really go very far with renewable energy unless we get our house in order in terms of energy efficiency. I also think that we should be looking at the issue of sustainable energy within the integrated, looking at natural resources and the efficient management of natural resources in an integrated process. We know that, a lot of energy is consumed to produce water. What we want to avoid is using water to produce renewable energy. And this is something to be thought about when we promote this strategic vision. The last point is on the need to look at the socio-economic and geopolitical dimension when we look at energy strategies. We know that we've heard also from the different experiences in the world that going the renewable energy road was a strategic choice, and the choice here for GCC country is how do they want to position themselves within the Arab region and globally in that sense, and what are the tools that we want to look at. The question of subsidies needs to be dealt with and matched with incentives, gradual phasing out of subsidies. It's a sensitive issue at this time of our history, but it's something that we need to really be looking at. I think that to make this story a success, renewable energy as a strategic option for the GCC region or sub-region, we need really a shift in the mindset. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rela, for this informative presentation. I will start with the questions, and I will start with Mr. Babali from King Abdullah City for Atomic and Renewable Energy, KCARE. You've been a lot on the news over the past few months with remarkable targets for renewable energy and energy diversification. Mr. Ibrahim leads actually the development of KCARE strategy and operating model, and that includes energy mix development, policy making, technology evaluation and selection, and developing regulatory and economic models necessary for introducing atomic and renewable energy in the energy mix. I also see that you have two patents in the oil industry, which is also very interesting, and you're very widely published. I think it would be really interesting for us. We've seen the white paper that establishes the framework around your plans in renewable energy. We also see some of the policy designs that you are introducing, such as local content requirement. So there is obviously underlying the strategy an effort to create jobs and create local value and socioeconomic benefits. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that, that would be very interesting. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. In the spirit of the past panel, I'm going to play the engineering role, being an engineer, and divide things into succinct and clearly articulated points in hoping that ultimately they will make sense to the subject at hand. And if you allow me to go at the fringes of the subject, because I think the most important points to consider really are not the core points. Yes, there are going to be employment opportunity created by the sector. Yes, manufacturing jobs are going to be there if you localize them. As our colleague from Energia, Ms. Tuta said, in not so affluent places, the jobs in services outweigh the other jobs. In affluent places, the same is the case. However, we need to start with an appraisal of the GCC employment situation with respect to can they be employed in renewable energy sector. And we need to address this point because very early on, the speaker that was invited to the stage by Mr. Amin in the first panel said something very interesting. He said, this part of the world does not need to create employment opportunities. And I think that's a very, very short-sighted statement to make. The reason behind this is that Saudi Arabia and the countries in the GCC followed the same pattern identically, something that the economists term the Dutch disease syndrome. The Dutch disease syndrome is a syndrome where there is a natural resource that is available at a very low cost of extraction that crowds out the other sectors, but it also could come from international monetary aid. What this happened in Saudi Arabia is that in the 70s, with the advent of oil price increasing after 1973, there was a lot of money for the government to dispense to its population through generous employment contracts for the government. The same thing is happening right now in other GCC countries, particularly where we are here and Qatar as a most recent example. This resulted in the population opting for very narrow margin of employment opportunities and forsaking the other sectors. In Saudi Arabia, it happened again in the petrochemical industry development in the early 80s, and we had actually double whammy, two Dutch disease syndromes in Saudi Arabia, and the other countries in the region are following suit. We are in a position right now in Saudi Arabia, our colleague Ms. Majdalani said very eloquently, we have a very high unemployment rate because we are still suffering from the consequences of what happened in the 70s when we did not deal properly with the Dutch disease syndrome of crowding out other sectors, not from a currency escalation point of view, but from employability of your youth. This is point number one. Point number two is related to the issue of branding. Our colleague from Germany said the German engineers are aspiring to become test drivers of Porsche or Mercedes. Our young technicians and engineers in Saudi Arabia aspire to work for the oil industry. the entire behemoth called Aramco employs 55,000 Saudis only. 55,000 Saudis only. And it amounts to 92% of the total economic output of the country. So, in our case, the situation is the branding attracts very few number of employees from the country. We have an opportunity in a new sector to create successfully a branding situation for the renewable energy to make it suitable for the employment opportunity that are going to be created to be filled by local nationals. And here, critically, the branding issue is very important. And we do not do a good job collectively on this, not only in Saudi Arabia, but elsewhere. Last point that I'm going to be addressing is, last point in the fringes, and then I go to the center, is that in terms of policy, I represent the government. I'm the chief strategist of the entity that was created to usher in renewable and nuclear energy to the energy landscape in Saudi Arabia. And conventionally, government sector does not talk to the private sector when it wants to set a policy with respect to employment opportunity creation. We talk a lot about Saudization. I suspect every place in the world they talk a lot about creating employment opportunities for their country nationals. And there is a significant divorce between the policy-making process, even in open and democratic societies, between the policy-making process from the government and from those who are supposed to be implementing those policy. If we continue to do this, I suspect that it is going to be very challenging for us to arrive at a point where our aspiration as a government to increase the employment opportunities, particularly the ones suitable for our national workforce, with companies that are going to be working in the renewable and nuclear sector, for our case, is going to be a challenge. I'll give you an example. We conducted a very, very comprehensive study in human capacity development for Saudi Arabia. Be more than happy to share it with you, any of you. And we found that if we engage the vendors early on, the Siemens, the GEs, the Arevas, the First Solar of the world, we are going to be increasing our Saudization rate by more than 25% just by engaging the vendors early on. Because if you engage them early on, not only that they're going to be creating employment opportunities for you, they're going to create employment opportunities for themselves, but attracting your young people to fill these employment opportunities. Now, going to the core, how do we avoid doing what we have been doing in the past, at least in Saudi Arabia, where I can claim to have some knowledge, is really to start from where we want to be and then come back. If we want to have our employment sector sustainable, we need to make sure that the first driver of sustainability for employability is set firmly in place, which is R&D. If you do not develop R&D capacity in your country, you're not going to be developing a sustainable manufacturing process. You're not going to be developing a sustainable innovation and optimization process of your services, and you will always be playing catch-up. Companies are going to come, they're going to install CSP plants in Saudi Arabia, and we're going to find that this type of company requires this type of capacity. Then let's go ahead and train our people to do that. We know in nuclear, roughly, we need 8 years to bring people up to speed to become operators. But unless we know which technology we're targeting, it's going to be case sensitive. So it behooves us as a policymaker in Saudi Arabia, and I believe elsewhere, to really start from our ultimate target, which is the sustainable employment opportunity creation and filling by our national workforce, and then work towards that from what is termed as an ambition-driven strategy. You set the target, you work towards achieving it, then sequentially you assess where you are, and then you correct the path. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this insights into the Saudi situation. I think it also illustrates the situation in other GCC countries with the problem of employability of the youth, with a large share of the population that is very young, that is coming into the labor market, with this disconnect also between policy making and policy implementation. And I would like to introduce now Thania Zayudi, who is the head of the Directorate of Energy and Climate Change in the UAE's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. where he leads the country's development of sustainable policy, both at the domestic and the international level. And prior to DEC, Dr. Zayudi was working at Masdar on the initiative to advance renewable energy technology and solutions, where he was part of the team in the Clean Development Mechanism. I'd like to ask you, Thani, in light of what was just said about Saudi Arabia, which in many ways echoes what is going on in other GCC countries, what do you think you can expect from creating a renewable energy sector in the UAE, as far as socioeconomic benefits are concerned?
The West Arab started the renewable energy sector almost 7 years ago now. And during that period, no one in this region was talking about renewables. And the leaders from the UAE saw that it is going to be a strategic move from the governments to invest in such sector. And one of the main drivers to invest in this sector was to create jobs in the field, and we managed to do that throughout the 7 years. The renewable energy sector was initiated through Masdar Initiative. And Masdar Initiative is part of the whole Mubadala group. Mubadala is one of our strategic investments company within the region. We're not looking for a direct profit, which is going to be generated in a period of 3 to 5 years, similar to the project's evaluation. But we're looking for the 20 years evaluation. Well, I remember when Masdar was initiated, I was a young engineer, petroleum engineer in oil and gas, and during that period, the oil and gas was attracting heavily the young national to work with them because of the brands, as we mentioned by my colleague, Dr. Ibrahim, as well as because of the packages and salaries in the oil and gas sector. However, we managed during that period to attract the talented to work with us at the renewable energy, and that's basically because we managed to build the brand very quickly, and we managed to translate the leadership, the leaders' visions into in our communication to those nationals to be attracted to the sector. Followed by the Masdar Initiative, we launched the nuclear plant, the peaceful nuclear plant, and from there we attracted more and more people to the sector. I totally agree with my colleague, Dr. Ibrahim, on what he mentioned on the national is always looking for grants. However, I don't think that much applicable nowadays in UAE because the leaders are always trying here to balance the market in a way that there is no big difference in packages from one place to the others. They're giving the benefits and prestige to all entities and to all companies working in the energy sector in general. We managed to do so many initiatives in the renewable energy companies, and from then we tackled the whole value chain by investing in the sector locally and internationally. We built the Masdar Institute, which is one of the main providers to the company, not only for Masdar but also to the whole sustainable sector within the Emirates and the whole country. We built a network around the world. We were sending our nationals around the world to the best international institutions to ensure that they're learning the best technology and best knowledge and policies and bring them back to the country. And we managed to do that through a big group who has been selected at the early stages of the company. Besides that, whenever we sign up the contract, we ensure that the UAE nationals is project managing the project, so they can learn quickly the whole process and engage in the project. And later on, they become the general managers or directors of those companies, which is going to be initiated later on. Through Masdar Institute, which I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, the good thing and the beauty of the leaders' touches within the institute that we are not charging the students. It's free of charge, not only for the national but also for the whole students who are coming from all over the world. And that's basically from the belief of our governments on the importance of human capital in the field. And they know that any sector will not continue without having very skilled and capable people and students graduated from their school. And that's why we focus within Masdar Institute in the research, and most of the studies are research-based, which is going to be transformed to practical projects later on. We noticed at the early stages, or first 2 years of the institute, that we're not attracting that much nationals to study in the Masdar Institute, and that was basically because of the high criteria that we put within Masdar Institute, which is sometimes too difficult for the nationals to fulfill that criteria. We came up with solutions. We worked with the local universities to ensure that the graduate students are up to that standard, to ensure they can easily be accepted by the institute. And we managed to raise the number. We were having something around 30% of the nationals are studying within Masdar Institute. And the beauty of those graduates are signing contracts to work with our local companies even before they graduate, because of the high caliber and the strong backgrounds and strong skills that they built within the 2 years they invest and they spend within Masdar Institute. The leaders within the UAE is always look at any strategic project to how that project is going to be benefiting the economy of the country, how many people will be recruited, how many people will be employed throughout the period of that project, and what are the consequences on long term. And this is the beauty of our leaders, and this is the visionary of our leaders, which are the standards that have been set a while ago by His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, and the founder of UAE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thani. I think everybody would concur to say that the UAE has been in the lead in the region, from starting a few years ago with having today concrete project on the ground, domestically and abroad. In terms of future development, I'd like to introduce Mr. Paddy Padmanathan, who is a civil engineer with over 30 years of experience and has served at ACWA Power since 2005. He started his career as a consulting engineer, delivering infrastructure projects, and then moved on to develop privately financed power, water, and wastewater projects. I think your experience and insights would be very valuable exactly in terms of the future development that you see in the region, and if you could address some of the challenges that you have faced in project development and related to the larger socioeconomic aspects in terms of maybe the skills that you need to hire that you may not be able to find, etc., that would be quite useful for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Evening. Well, actually, I can give you, it's late in the evening, so I think we should be heading towards some optimism. I can give you some real practical examples of what in reality is happening on the ground, and also show you how technological innovation, financial innovation is actually way ahead of policy. We just need to make sure that policy catches up. One example I want to give you stretches a little bit beyond GCC, but it's relevant, live, so I'll share that with you. In Morocco, we are 9 months into construction of a CSP, concentrated solar power plant, as a developer. So we've got a construction group that is building the plant. It's $900 million investment, so it's a fairly large project. The tender requirements required us to include 30% at a minimum local content. During the tender preparation, we challenged our construction partners because we were very convinced that we could get more value we could reduce the cost by increasing local content and not follow the conventional practice of pursuing their comfort zone and the established supply chain that they normally work with. So upon a lot of push and cajoling from us, they did that, and we submitted a tender with about 40%, just over 40% local content. Well, we have now pretty much procured bulk of the bulk items, and what I can tell you is that I'm very confident we will end up completing this project with local content in excess of 50%. It's very important, not just for jobs, but also for economic value retention in country. One of the things that Ibrahim pointed out, he was focusing on the job angle in the oil industry. Well, guess what? It's exactly the same. It mirrors the value retention angle. So something, oil center of the world, we have been producing oil and exporting it for such a long time. But yet, even today, something over 70 US cents of every dollar that is spent in extracting that oil out of the ground and putting it into a ship goes out of the country. That's the reality, okay? Now, but that's relevant when we think about renewable energy. Well, I think we are past the discussion that does renewable energy have a role in this part of the world? Well, of course it does, because it is the most competitive way to deliver the electricity for a segment of the load curve in this part of the world, where we have perfect load match. When the sun is high, we need extra energy. Well, guess what? We can deliver that with photovoltaic, provided, of course, we price the fossil fuel that we use as an alternative at the correct price. That is well understood, and we are moving down that road. So we will go towards 20, 30, 40% of electricity over a period of time. We will go towards producing that with renewable energy. Gas-fired power plant costs typically $800 per kilowatt, capital investment that you make. You then spend the rest of the money every year, year on year, paying for a ton of fuel. That fuel, as I've already pointed out to you, the value of it goes out of the country. Now, at best, we can retain in a gas-fired power plant today 40% in country. That's $320 per kilowatt. A CSP plant costs $4,500. Okay, then immediately you say, oh, how can that be cost effective? Well, you know what? We don't pay for the fuel after that. So that 4,500 dollars per kilowatt, even if initially we only get to keep 40%, is $1,800. So we get to keep straight away nearly 6 times. We retain 6 times the value that we would if we were to deploy a gas plant. Because after we have deployed that expenditure, we don't get to spend a lot of money because the fuel is free. So absolutely no-brainer that renewable energy has the maximum potential for us to start retaining significant economic value. And indeed, if we apply the right policies, as Ibrahim is already pointing out, and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is down that path, starting off with knowledge retention, knowledge creation, and starting to target the right type of employment, we can retain a significant amount, we can create and retain a significant amount of jobs as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This idea of trying to localize value is something that I'd like to pursue with the next speaker, who is Mr. Ahmed Nada, Vice President for Business Development in the Middle East of First Solar, and who drives basically the growth strategy in the region. You bring with you 2 decades of experience in the energy and the power industry, and you're based in Dubai and lead the business development activities across the region. Can you tell us a bit more about localizing value and maybe also broaden it a little bit to some of the challenges that you face in trying to get the skills necessary and some of or whatever is necessary for the development of your projects at the local level?
Good evening, and thank you very much. I think I should first echo the same observations that our colleague Paddy here from industry has highlighted. First Solar is a fairly newcomer to the region, not to the PV industry, of course. And I think there was a myth when we first landed. I've been in the job only for 1 year, and 15 years of my career was with GE. So I wasn't even sure that First Solar will make it in the region. And we looked at very serious challenges when the team came to execute the first project, which is the DEWA 13, as we call it, which is a small project with DEWA based on EPC. And I think First Solar was gearing up with all its mighty, engineering team, execution team, project management team, and we're going to deploy a project. We don't know anything about the country, so we better come prepared and bring everything from outside. And of course, as we studied the value chain in the place, we put a target, that was even more aggressive than the 30 or 40%, which is 50%. And very, very soon in such a small project, of course, the team was able to not even going outside the UAE, okay? So let alone the rest of the Gulf countries, which has even some more advanced deployment of capital in certain industries like in Saudi Arabia. So even within the UAE itself, we were able to immediately capture 50% of the value chain in the country. So I think that has helped strategically to position the company that, maybe our first task for any project in the future would be to continue to address the value chain from the GCC enabler, which are like the ZAMIL of the Saudi Arabia, the cables, in the UAE, et cetera, et cetera. So without any limitation, I can say that all what was highly spec'd by a very sophisticated customer such as DEWA, we were able to get from the local market here in the UAE. And I think renewables in general, and particularly solar, the economics will continue to be in the integration of the balance of system. I think we are being asked a lot of questions about manufacturing. And in reality, today, the solar panel itself continues to be a declining cost product, which is good news for the end users and the consumers and the project developers. But at the same time, it's no more than 30% of the value chain. So 70% of the value chain continues to be from somewhere other than the manufacturing of a solar panel. And if we can get 50%, so we are left with 20%, I think the big partners of a company like First Solar, such as GE or Siemens or ABB, when it comes to the inverters, which is maybe the second biggest item in the whole chain, are also considering, looking at manufacturing in the region here. So naturally speaking, as the programs of renewables and particularly solar energy continue to build up in the region, we and others who are also leaders in the industry will have to understand that it is naturally good to be in country. It's naturally fair to localize. And I think all the policymakers are eager to see more local deployment of an engagement of industrialists to continue to drive this low cost, and enable a more competitive tariff to the end user. I think that's one angle that we can look at. And the other angle, which was interesting also, is that we have seen a very interesting appetite to co-develop new ideas in the region. And I think we as First Solar, of course, I'm not speaking about the entire industry here, we have made one small step to first look at the Emiratization process. And we went to DEWA and said, look, for the sake of everyone, we want you to have a fair deal. And the first thing is to make sure that your team, the Emirati team, can evaluate projects, and they're comfortable to understand the economics. And let's help you do that. We will get a neutral body to educate the team about the commercialization and engineering of solar projects. So we associated with the University of Arizona in the US, which is a good strategic partner to First Solar in the US. And we deployed 8 engineers from DIWA, all Emiratis. They graduated last week. We're picking 3 of them to send them to First Solar for 6-month rotation. So we are trying to also engage in, like, not influencing it, but at least, here is a neutral program from a well-reputed education institute who can help you to start to look at this, and engage to start deploying young engineers and be able to evaluate all the projects that will be, deployed by DIWA. And we know DIWA is a very demanding customer, so we want to make sure that they get fair and concrete answers to all the questions that they need for the deployment of the project in the near future. So I think we are very comfortable to continue to localize our presence, continue to localize our engagement. There is a new research institute also that I think DIWA is trying to make a small research center near to the power station, and we said we are happy to support that, at any time, where eventually, even if there is an IP or intellectual property requirement that you will own it and benefit from, we look into that. So as an industrialist in the private sector, we have seen a tremendous value of being local with trying to localize things rather than, bringing and parachuting things from outside the region. And the region has been very well responding, and I think not only in GCC, we see other neighboring countries as well, such as Jordan, in the same path, and hopefully Egypt as well. Thank you.
I must say, I'm almost shocked by what I'm hearing, because everything you read and everything you hear is you shouldn't localize, and it makes it all very expensive, and the development won't happen. So it's quite interesting to hear the perspective of not only people who build the strategies and have a maybe larger vision in terms of economic development, and where you can sort of understand how that certain things need to be internalized in order to move your country from one stage of development to another, but also from a project development point of view, where you see that on the ground things are happening and they can be localized. So I'd like to understand maybe a bit more whether you do face challenges in terms, for example, of another thing we hear very often is, the policy framework is not established, and therefore the right incentives are not there, and that's why the development cannot happen at the scale that it should happen. Also, the market size should be larger, because Oman, for example, has aspiration to have some manufacturing, but the size of the market is too small, etc., etc. So I'd like you to react to this, please.
Look, I don't want to leave any misconceptions. Yes, there are lots of challenges. I focused on value retention because we are seeing that is very easy to do, because the industrial infrastructure is there. In Saudi Arabia, fantastic industrial infrastructure is there. So what do we need in CSP? We need galvanizing baths. They're there. So we are able to do some big amounts of local manufacturing. But if you strip down then to that job creation, real sort of value, socio-economic value creation, now that's where the tough part comes, and Ibrahim was absolutely right. We need to focus, and that's a much more difficult thing to do, to get the right jobs created, convince the private sector to train employees, support them through, and last the course. So for that, what is it that is needed? Well, it's very simple. It's TLC. Yes, not tender love and care, but transparency, longevity, and certainty. Transparency, if you are very transparent in the alternatives and price those transparently, you will realize that it is better to do it this way. Okay, and then what we need is longevity and price and policy certainty. It's very difficult. It's one thing to respond to a 200 megawatt tender and deliver the lowest possible tariff there. And we are convinced, and my colleague here, Ahmed, is convinced that in order to deliver the lowest possible price, we must maximize local content. It's very easy. It's got nothing. So, yes, it is absolutely counterintuitive, but it's fact. localization does not come, appropriate localization does not come. If you try to make a gas turbine locally, yes, of course, there's going to be an enormous price premium because it'll be the first one that you'll be making. But fortunately, renewable energy, particularly solar energy, both PV as well as CSP, is not, as much as we might try to pretend, it's not rocket science. It's built up of a lot of very simple components. So it is very conducive to localization, and that's the best way to do it. But for us, even for private sector to invest in knowledge creation, for companies to come and partner with KAUST or Mazda Institute or KAUST to start to do research and development and innovation, they need to see a longer horizon. We are all starting to believe the reality. Over the next, today in this region, we have got about 90 gigawatts of generation capacity. We recognize that even with energy efficiency kicking in, over the next 20 years, this is going to grow to about 190. We realize that a significant amount of that, even if it's 20% only, that's 40 gigawatts. Even if it's only 20%, that's a very significant amount of renewable energy. But we need a little bit of certainty around that. If we can see, and it doesn't have to be even 40, it can be 20 gigawatts that is going to get deployed, then you will start to attract. So what is desperately lacking behind, as I said to you, is policy certainty. Absolutely convinced that once policy is there is no shortage. Fortunately, in our region, in other parts of the world, it's something different, I know. We're not short of capital. We don't have to worry about displacing. Germany has got a huge problem. It's got to worry about closing down things. Coal-fired, gas-fired power plants going out of business. We don't have to worry because we are consuming more energy, so these are all new plants coming online. We need to continue to build. We don't have to worry about displacing or closing things down. So we're very fortunate in many respects with a lot of good things. So that is the good news. Policy, certainty.
You're actually answering my next question, which I'd like to ask all the panelists, which is what are the necessary conditions basically for renewable energy to be part of the energy mix in the region that would at the same time maximize socioeconomic benefits? What are the necessary conditions? So you're saying policy? And maybe I can ask first Roland, and then we'll go back through to the different members of the panel.
I think that first and foremost, it's a good understanding of the jobs that are going to be created. It's not enough just to say that X number of jobs will be there, but how, in what sector. I think also we hear a lot about opportunities for jobs from or for disciplines from outside the traditional engineering discipline. However, I think that there is a myth to some extent in that. It's to some extent the engineering field is a bit impermeable to having other disciplines come to that field, and there has to be much more dialogue between the different disciplines to understand what other disciplines in social sciences, policy analysis, strategic studies can contribute to that field. And the right policy mix, I think we should look at the social, the economic instrument, the legal instrument, with a long-term vision of where do the GCC want to get at in terms of like 20 years to 30 years down the road, which is the title of this of the conference, looking at tomorrow's jobs today.
I have 3 points to say in response to this question. Number one, it's in retrospect, actually. I don't know where I had, otherwise I would have said my head is off to our brothers, Emiratis, particularly Masdar, because they were truly brave. And they have the scars to show their bravery. But if it were not for the courageous attempt and implementation by muster of the renewable energy program in the first country in the GCC, as my colleague said correctly 7 years ago when they started, I can assure you we would have fallen into the same traps in Saudi Arabia and faced the same difficulties in Saudi Arabia and had the same scars in Saudi Arabia that our brothers in the UAE have faced. So my hat is off to them. This is very important because having a path maker is critical for a pathfinder to find that path. And the path was made by muster. There's absolutely no doubt. So this is a foregone conclusion. We don't have to worry about it. But it's critical to acknowledge. Number two is really we are in desperate need of a paradigm shift. In desperate need of a paradigm shift in the region from 2 points of view. The first one is related to energy security. We have seen in one of the presentations today, actually by Ms. Majdalani, the first circle was in her third slide was energy security. And energy security in this part of the world has nothing to do with supply of energy because nobody can block the sun. Nobody. But if you do not develop your harvesting mechanism in-house or a significant part thereof, you buy it from China, you buy it from Germany, wherever, you do not have energy security. In Saudi Arabia, we are the largest desalination of seawater by volume globally, 18%. We import 93% of our entire value chain of water desalination from Korea. If the Koreans are to become upset with us, we would become very thirsty. And it is simple because we have not developed the value chain. So we need a paradigm shift with respect to energy security. It's not about oil or gas supply. It's about the local content. And part of that local content is really, again, by necessity. We need to go beyond manufacturing. I suspect that if you go into any conference and ask people a show of hand, what do you mean by local content, localization? 99% will tell you manufactured products. And we just heard from our colleague, Ahmed, saying that 30% is the solar panel. The rest is elsewhere. But 99% of people who talk to you about localization talk to you about that 30% for a reason. Because the rest is truly hairy, complicated. There is so much of it. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Then the last paradigm shift that we need to think about is really not upfront cost. Not upfront cost. Not upfront cost. What do I mean by this? If we are going to be deciding between renewable energy or hydrocarbons for Saudi Arabia, for electricity, the only thing we look at is the number that Patty cited, $800 per kilowatt for gas, $4,500 per CSP for kilowatt. But what we do not do, and this is where we desperately need a paradigm shift in this region, is what is the value added from burning that hydrocarbon to generate 1 kilowatt hour for the industry or for household consumption? If we do the math, looking at what value add will come from properly investing your resources properly, we will see that it is actually much better for us from a long-term economic development to invest in dedicating the electricity part and the desalination part in our countries who need both from non-fossil based, even though the fossil is significantly less expensive, because the value added from dedicating fossil elsewhere is significantly more and significantly better to the economy. So what we need really is mindset change, a paradigm shift.
Thank you. Sani, please.
I don't think it's big issue on Saudi Arabia or Oman, which is most of our nationals would like to work only in the governmental organization, not in the private sector, which is a big issue here in America. What the leaders nowadays are focusing on how they can attract more nationals to work in the private sector. And basically the main reason is because of the packages and the long-term benefits in terms of retirements, etc., etc. And both Qatar and UAE are going to face a big challenge to sort out this issue. How can we move ahead with the more acceptance or invest more renewables in the region? I totally agree with Dr. Ibrahim. The paradigm shift and the economic evaluation. Unfortunately, whenever there is a project, they evaluate our economics evaluate the projects based on our local prices, not based on international prices. Yeah. Which means that for sure it's going to be negative whenever you compare it to the conventional projects. And this is the big mistake that our financial models are doing whenever they evaluate such projects. The other thing that I think we need to work on the awareness. Many people here have been spending very long time in the oil and gas sector, or they're interested in the oil and gas sector, and they see any clean energy projects are a threat to the oil and gas, which is not the case, because clean energy is complementing oil and gas. The region is going to face a huge energy demand in the near future, and we need to diversify our energy to ensure that we can fulfill the demand of our population. I think that's
I'm gonna maybe skip you, Paddy, since you answered it, and ask Mr. Nada to answer the question.
Actually, we as an industrialist, we have to make our numbers. Okay, so I think our message is very clear: is that we need speed of deployment of programs, or speed of deployment of policies, as Paddy has highlighted. We hear about accessibility to the grid, high voltage, medium voltage, legal opinions about if this country or that country will allow you to wheel, the energy that you produce somewhere where you have the best economics to another place. So it's all related to different aspects of the policy. But I think also, I echo what Dr. Ibrahim said about, specific applications to renewable energy maybe can help a lot to overlook, the economics that today everyone is evaluating. And by that, I take a very critical sector of any country economy, which is the agriculture. If you cannot own your food or part of the food supply chain in your country, you are in a big problem. Renewables is a place where you can really shift that completely, and the economics of any agriculture area, including arid regions, in certain countries. So we are willing to see that renewable energy can solve problems in the region, but we need speed to be able to demonstrate that. And we also need a free, formula. I think that countries which are heading into a feed-in tariff, will not be able to sustain that. Paddy doesn't like it. He believes that the system should adjust itself. He's been doing a great job in Morocco, as he mentioned, where he has now financed the lowest CSP power plant in the world. Nobody believes the figures that he has been able to put together to generate 160 megawatt of CSP. So we need to continue to drive these kind of initiatives that let the market decide. The path is very clear. The technologists such as First Solar, who own its own technology, not just manufacture it, we see a huge path of improvement in efficiency and output, and also cost of deployment, whether the 30% value chain on the solar panels or even for the rest of the system. So we want to see a quick deployment of these things so that we can demonstrate the value into the mix of energy and the socio-economic impact on it as fast as possible, so that people don't come back and say, you know what, it's not working. We cannot afford not to make it work. I'm from this region, so I'm not going anywhere. I want to see it work. Okay, so I'm not going to California. So we need the developers and the strategists and the policymakers to understand that we have time frame, and we want to make sure that the large and true and respectable competitors stay in the region to be able to bring the expected returns they have promised to their shareholders.
Thank you very much. I will maybe conclude by saying that, yes, I think what you, Mr. Ibrahim, spoke about a paradigm shift. I think that's probably necessary, but I would say not only in this region, in many regions in this world. And maybe the UAE was the path maker and an important one as such. A few of the other countries in the GCC maybe have found the path now. Saudi Arabia maybe is one of them. I think Qatar has. We've seen here and there, we see some targets that have been announced, some more projects. So maybe there is a shift that has started. I would like to thank the panel for the very important insights that we have received in terms of the developments in the region. And maybe we can applaud the panel. I would like to now call our Director of Knowledge, Policy and Finance, who will conclude the day, Mr. Hugo Lucas.
Thank you very much, Rabia. First of all, I would like to excuse my Director General, Mr. Adnan Amin, who really wanted to do this closing remark, but due to unexpected changes in his very busy agenda, was not able to make it. It was mentioned by some of our panelists that renewable energy resources are for free. The sun is for free, the wind is for free, the rainfall is for free. On top of that, the renewable energy is all over. It's not localized in a few countries, but it's globally localized. Renewable energy technologies also can address the three uses, can address electricity, transport, heating and cooling. And besides, they're very modular. You can have a very small PV panel and a multi-megawatt renewable energy project. So I do believe that we are in a renewable energy transition and this will not stop. And very recently I was addressing IRENA Council and I mentioned that private companies that doesn't see this, they will be out of business, similar to Kodak that didn't show the digital cameras or to Nokia that didn't show the smartphones. But for this to happen sooner and better, we still have two challenges. One is finance and the second one is people. I do believe there is not one single week in the year that is not an event about renewable energy and finance. I'm responsible for renewable energy and finance in IRENA, and we have 3 side events on this, only during this week of World Future Energy Summit. This is why I'm really glad that yesterday I addressed the Assembly to talk about people. It was mentioned by Dr. Al-Sayudi that we need more awareness. Of course, if we want to double renewable energies in 2030, as I mentioned yesterday to our Assembly, we will fill the landscape with wind turbines and the roof with PV panels. And we need a lot more than social acceptance. We need social support. We need people being active in this energy transition. But this is why I'm really proud of doing this closing remark in the first Renewable Energy and Jobs Conference. Once again, IRENA talking about renewable energy and people. To finish, I just would like to thank all the panelists for the knowledge that they have shared with us and their advice. To thank all the audience for joining us today during the whole long day, and take the benefit of having the word to congratulate Rabia and her team for the fabulous work they have done in this matter with the report and the conference. My very last word is to invite you all to join us for a refreshment here in the closed room. Thank you very much.